Раді вітати вас на лабораторії створення документальних VR-фільмів, яка народилась у Харкові, як і фестиваль DocuDays. Мене звати Оксана Сигарева, я кураторка лабораторії. Поруч зі мною Марія Степанюк, яка є координаторкою.
Ми дуже раді, що саме DocuDays доєднався до її реалізації, як місце сили документалістів країни. Саме для них ми створили цю лабораторію, але насправді вона буде доречна спеціалістам з різних сфер.
Лабораторія пропонує 6 кроків зі створення VR-фільмів, від розробки історії до промоції та дистрибуції. Для цього ми запросили 6 спеціалістів прочитати лекції на прикладах з їх практики. Головна задача лабораторії – розширити інструментарій документального кіно через залучення можливостей віртуальної реальності.
Ми сподіваємось, що прослухавши всі лекції, вам буде легше йти на територію VR. І після лабораторії з'явиться більше історій мовою віртуальної реальності. Сьогодні ви почуєте Ґаятрі Parameswaran з лекцією «Storytelling у віртуальній реальності». Ґаятрі – співзасновниця студії Now Here Media, світового лідера імерсивного сторітелінгу, що базується в Берліні, та авторка багатьох відзначених імерсивних досвідів.
Ґаятрі розповість про те, як режисерам та митцям застосувати навички сторітелінгу для імерсивних медіа, про формування концепції сценарію для VR.
Протягом лекції ви можете ставити питання в чатах. У нас буде час розібрати їх після лекції, а ті, хто присутні в Zoom, матимуть можливість задати питання наживо. Вітаємо, Ґаятрі!
Thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you on DocuDays. Thanks for the invitation. And today I'm here to, as Maria and Oksana already introduced, I'm here to speak about some of the tools that we use for storytelling using virtual reality. So if we can share the slides, please, that would be great. Perfect. A little bit of background about who we are and what I do. Can we have the next slide, please? Now Here Media is an immersive storytelling studio that's based in Berlin. And we design immersive experiences that claim to open hearts and minds. So we really believe in the power of stories to transform and transform societies for good. Both my co-founder Felix Ketke, who will also be part of this lecture series later on, we have a background in journalism and documentary making. And our main areas of focus through our careers have been human rights, social justice, and the climate crisis. So it fits very well with the program that you have curated here at the larger documentary festivals, the DocuDays. What we do at Now Here Media is really to design immersive experiences that can take our audiences to the heart of the story. We do that with the help of augmented reality or virtual reality or installations or any other media that's going to satisfy the needs of the story. So we use the technology to serve the story instead of letting the story serve the technology. And that would be also one of the tips that I will share with you through this process. Can we have the next slide, please? We do the work that we do with the help of some amazing partners who have supported us through this journey. Our partners include, they come from many different fields. So we have partnered with media organizations such as National Geographic in the past, nonprofits such as the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, or also media grants and foundations such as the Sundance Institute, also partners that fund us such as the Medienbord, Berlin Brandenburg, and other funders globally. such as Kaleidoscope, which is now called Artisan. We also have partnered with tech companies in the past. So Oculus and HTC Vive are some of the examples of our tech partners. And it's really important to acknowledge that the work we do is a result of a co-creation with all these different partners together. Some of the laurels that we've achieved through this co-creative work is being able to show our work at leading A-list film festivals such as the Venice International Film Festival or South by Southwest or Cannes or HotDocs. And then we are also actively partnering with venues, cultural venues such as museums and other places. Sometimes we have public installations, depending on what the project needs. Can we have the next slide, please? As I mentioned earlier, we really believe in the strength and the power of storytelling. And as Ursula Le Guin says, one of the functions of art is to give people the words to know their own experience. And storytelling is a tool for knowing who we are and what we want. So I always tell up-and-coming artists and storytellers and creators that don't underestimate the power that you have as a storyteller, as an author, as an artist, and a creator, because you actively play a role in transforming the way society thinks by just telling the story that you're telling, you know? Next slide, please. For those of you here who are beginning to do storytelling, just starting out with storytelling, immersive storytelling, pardon me, it's not something new. I want to break this illusion that immersive storytelling is something very, very new in our field of work. An immersive experience is something, according to one definition, it's something that pulls a person into a new or an augmented reality, which enhances everyday life by making it more engaging or satisfying via technology. So the use of the technology is something new to create immersiveness with your storytelling. But the way that humans have been telling stories to each other, whether it's, tens of thousands of years ago, when we sat by the fire and narrated stories, made up our stories, and with our very fertile imagination, or whether it was narrating history, immersing your audiences in your stories is something that has been at the core of the storyteller's job and ambition from the very beginning of humanity. So don't be afraid of, just because there is a technology element, it shouldn't intimidate you as a storyteller. What you do, even without the technology, is immersive. We all know, and we've all experienced being immersed in a book, not knowing what's happening around us, but being so immersed in the world that an author has created just with the help of words. The technology is only a tool for you to help tell your story in more immersive ways. Next slide, please. One of the reasons we work with immersive storytelling is, and what fascinates us about immersive storytelling is its ability to engage with so many different senses that the human experience is capable of, whether it's vision, whether it's hearing, whether it's the sense of smell, the sense of taste, and the sense of touch, feeling something. A truly immersive experience is something that engages as many of these different senses as possible. Next slide, please. What we realized over our journey, through the course of our journey, creating immersive narratives, is that immersive narratives are able to give you a sense of presence very easily. And that's what the technology enables. It brings you very close to the subject that you're trying to deal with, especially when you're talking about documentaries, when you're talking about nonfiction work. It's with a virtual reality story, for instance, you're able to take your audiences to your subjects, to your issues, to the point of your story very easily. by transporting them directly to the place where the stories are taking place. And that is one of the main reasons we also use virtual reality as a tool for storytelling. And what we've realized through our experience with telling these kind of stories is that it can be used as a tool for empathy building. This is it has been controversial using the term empathy. You know, famously, Chris Milk once said, VR is the empathy machine, or, you know, there has been a lot spoken and you know, debated about this. Any medium can build empathy. And I think it's up to us as creators to use the medium and use really our storytelling in a way that it builds empathy. Next slide, please. Yeah, Confucius once famously said, "Tell me and I will forget. Show me, I will remember. Involve me and I will understand." And that is what immersive storytelling allows you to do. It gives the audiences, it invites the audiences to participate in your story. They are not passively consuming what you are feeding them, but rather they are playing an active role. They are a participant and they have a role to play in the narrative that you have woven for them. Next slide, please. Can we, I just want to quickly speak about some examples of our work to help you understand where we come from and what we do. One of our projects that I want to showcase here is called Home After War. This was created, or this was released or premiered at the Venice International Film Festival in 2018, and then went on to win the Best Use of Immersive Arts Award at South by Southwest in 2019. This was a film that was created together with Oculus as part of the Oculus VR for Good Creators Lab, and also with the nonprofit Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining. The topic of this project is really difficult and heavy. It's about the dangers of improvised explosive devices that have been left behind after war in Iraq, in the Middle East. Our job as storytellers in this case was to really raise awareness about the issue that was going on. So for instance, what our research showed was that after the war in Iraq, after ISIS left Iraq, a lot of civilians were returning back home and they were finding their homes booby-trapped. So what that means is that they would come home, open the gate to their homes, and that would set off an explosion, or they would turn on the switch and that could trigger an explosion, which meant that a lot of civilian lives were in danger as an aftermath of war. And we wanted to raise awareness about this new kind of a threat to civilians as a result of this modern warfare. And our main target audience with this piece were policymakers and decision makers who could influence how their policies and decisions can directly influence or better the lives of civilians in these areas. I'll speak a bit more about it, but it would be great if we could play the trailer. So if we could play the video with this screen, please.
You know, our house is our home. When ISIS came here, I heard fighting between them and the security forces. Bombs were falling from planes. We took the car and fled. We said that we are going home, even if that meant we had to live on the rubble, because we were fed up with being strangers. We heard that there were houses where the electricity was booby-trapped. If you see a bomb, you would usually recognize it. But this stuff is new. They were my wings.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess one of our main successes, I would say, with this piece was not only to be at all the different film festivals, which is great for your filmmaking ego, but what made us really proud was the fact that we could exhibit at the United Nations 3 times, where decision makers and policymakers were meeting to discuss exactly this topic, how to deal with the new challenge that was facing civilians who were returning home after the war. And this happened at the United Nations in New York once and in Geneva twice. So we knew from the beginning there would be 3 to 4 meetings every year where policymakers who are responsible for this topic were meeting behind closed doors. And in order to use, what we ended up doing is used the virtual reality film as a tool for advocacy. So when they had breaks between their meetings, we would get them into the headset. There was an installation built up and we would get them into the headset and go them, like it's a 15-minute piece. So it was, we could get them through the experience, and that would really make it powerful for them to return to their tables and then look at the entire topic with a much more human perspective. We told the story here of an Iraqi father of 2 sons to an explosion because of an IED in Fallujah. And one of the biggest rewards for me as part of this whole experience was when the ambassador, the Iraqi ambassador to the United Nations came out of the headset. He saw the piece, he came out of the headset, and he said, I go to Iraq and work on this subject every month. I spend a week or 2 in Iraq, but I never have the time to spend so much time with one family and listening to their story. And that's what your virtual reality experience enabled. And that is the power of VR, is to be able to build this proximity, build this intimate kind of relationship between the audience member and the subject. I apologize if there's background noise, but I can't control it. It's happening somewhere outside. So sorry about that. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, this is the piece we are currently working on. It's almost produced and it will premiere later this summer. It will release. It's a virtual reality, an interactive virtual reality documentary about a sleeping language called Kusunda in Nepal. One fact about languages and languages that are going dormant, and this is a phenomenon that's global, is that every 2 weeks, a language falls silent in the world, which is, to me, it's a very sad reality, because with every language, you lose a way of looking at the world. You lose a worldview. And not only that, a language is not just something that's made up of grammar and vocabulary and syntax, but it's something that brings a community together. It builds an identity, and it's very important in transmitting culture. So if we lose a language, we lose all of that. And we started working on this documentary nearly 10 years ago, but then dropped it and then picked it up again, end of 2018. And a lot of things have happened in the life of this piece. But at the core of it, what you experience as an audience member is that you're invited by the community, by Hema over here, whom you see, the younger teenager, and her grandfather, Lil Bahadur. And they are members of an indigenous group in Nepal called Kusunda, whose language is also called Kusunda. And the language is very, very special. It's a language isolate, which means it's unrelated to any other language of the world. And they are inviting you to to speak their language so they invite you to speak certain words in the Kusunda language, and using voice-based interactions, you can actually navigate through the virtual reality experience. The piece is about Lil Bahadur, who is a Kusunda shaman, and he used to live a nomadic hunter-gatherer life in the jungles of Nepal until 4 decades ago. And he used to speak the language, but he has forgotten the language since he moved away from the community, like from his traditional way of life. He lost that habitat, and then he moved into settling down in a village when he met his wife. And in the last 40 years, the language has left him, and he can't speak it anymore. But his granddaughter, Hema, is able to now speak the language. She's learning it. And she's very proud of trying to keep the language alive. Can we please play the trailer of the piece, please?
Gilangi mat oichi, gilangi mat oichi, akpe tokda gilang mangji.
अदराजैमा खाने बस्ने खाने पिने कुरो हुन्छ अब बिर्सेको भाषा मलाई कस्तो लाग्यो नराम्रो लाग्छ आफ्नो भाषाबाट बोल्न पाएपछि तपाईले एकदम तन्न सुन्ने कुरो हुन्छ
यो कुसुन्डा भाषा रहेन भने चाहिँ किन नेपालमा कुसुन्डा छ भन्ने पनि अस्तित्व रहँदैन यो कुसुन्डा भाषा संस्कृतिलाई चाहिँ एकदम पनि बचाउन सक्छु भन्ने चाहिँ मलाई एकदम पनि आश छ आँट पनि छ है
Yeah. So this piece was created using photogrammetry, volumetric video, and as you can see, it's partly animated. So a lot of different technologies coming together, as well as voice-based interactions. So with any virtual reality work, I think one thing you need to be ready to do is to be open to learn new techniques, new technologies, and just the learning curve is just, very, very steep with every piece of work that we produce, which is fascinating because you never get bored of doing something. You're constantly challenged by new possibilities. And that's something that I found quite different from film, from working in film, is that there is, we've developed a language in film over a century, and that doesn't exist in virtual reality at the moment. It's a young medium when it comes to narrative storytelling. And so as we are creating these pieces of work, we are writing the grammar in some ways. And that's very, very exciting for us. And we love to experiment with different techniques. We spend a lot of time testing things, experimenting at Now Here. Next slide, please. So what I thought might be really good to do is for those of you who are joining here on Zoom and who feel comfortable, it would be really great for me to know before we dive into actual kind of, what I plan to do next is really share some trade secrets, things from inside our studio, how we approach a story. And in order to do that, it would be fantastic for me to know who's in the room and what your experience is with immersive formats. What brings you here? If you're a documentary filmmaker, maybe you're trying to experiment with, experiment with VR. So if the format allows, it would be fantastic if you could actually introduce yourself very, very briefly and then just tell me your experience and what you expect. Does anyone feel up for it?
We want to do VR film, you know.
And how far are you in the production? Like, how far are you in the piece?
We participate in some scene that we can do soon, and other working by parts, because we can't do it like you. I think you do it with big parts. 2 months, you say, yeah? How long is project actually?
Oh, it takes really long. It takes perhaps, I mean, Home After War took 1 year approximately to finish, from start to end, from pre-production to end. Kusunda took much longer because we had to raise the financing as well. So 2.5 years almost. Yeah, but sounds exciting. Thanks for sharing. Is there anyone else who wants to introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on?
I think no.
Okay, no worries. So let's move to the next kind of section. If I can have the slideshow up once again, that would be fantastic. And the next slide, please. Great. I am not seeing. I'm not seeing the slideshow very big on my screen anymore, but it's quite small on the tile, so I'm not able to read very well. Can you change that perhaps?
I think we see it okay.
Okay, I see you on my screen as big. So maybe I pinned you or something. Okay, now it's fine. All right. So before we dive further into how to write for immersive, or how to create, like how to do the storytelling in immersive, I think it's very, very important to understand what is unique about immersive formats. What is it that immersive formats allow us to capitalize on? One of the first things that anyone notices is the sense of presence with your body in virtual reality. And here right now, for simplicity, since this is the VR Doc Lab, I think we are going to focus only on virtual reality, not on augmented reality or mixed reality or anything else. So from now on, what I'm speaking about is mainly virtual reality. So what does it mean to have presence with your body? So you might have also experienced this yourself if you've been inside a headset, or heard other people who have been in a headset for the first time. When they take off their headset, the first thing they normally say is, oh, wow, it felt like I was there. So a lot of people, the unique kind of affordance of virtual reality that you can capitalize on is the sense of presence. So when you ask, there have been studies where first-time users would mainly use the terms like, I was flying in this place, I was standing there, I saw this, I saw that, instead of this was a film that was showing so and so and so. So that's the difference in virtual reality, is that you have, for instance, if you have an avatar, and if you move your real body, your virtual body will move as well. And that means your relation to the virtual world is very different. It's very close to your relationship to the real world and the real you in some ways. It's similar to what I feel right now, speaking on the Zoom video, is when I move my hand, my real hand, the image of my virtual hand is moving as well. So I know that that is me. It's that same kind of relationship that you have in a virtual world with your body, but it's way more immersive because it's not on a screen and it's not in 2D medium, but it's similar to life, that it's all around you and it's all encompassing. Next slide, please. This is a continuation. I think just moving one step forward in this sense of presence is the relationships you have to other objects or bodies in a virtual world inside a virtual reality headset. Normally, this can be illustrated by seeing how people behave in virtual worlds. Normally, you wouldn't necessarily feel like walking into a wall. And that is your relationship to a wall in the real world, because the real walls are made of concrete. And you assume your relationship with this real, from your real world, you transfer that knowledge into the virtual world. And you build a real sense of, you have a relationship with the virtual wall as well. So you wouldn't necessarily walk through a wall. In the same way, if you have a cup of tea in a virtual world that you can interact with, that you can lift, you would lift it. If you could throw it, you would throw it around. And it would, if it breaks, that might even replicate your relationship to what would happen in the real world if you were picking up a teacup and dropping it on the ground. So that is unique. That's something that doesn't happen in film. You cannot interact with film in the same way, right? You can't put your hand through the screen and pick up things. You can't see yourself inside a film. So the sense of presence is something that you need to always keep in mind while designing for virtual reality. Next slide, please. This is I just wanted to illustrate this actually, and I have to share screen in order to do that. Just give me 1 second. What I mean by your relationship to objects. 1 second. Yes, this is it. Let me know if you cannot hear, but wait, I need to turn on the music, the sound, share sound. Oh. Yeah, I think you get the hang of it in the sense that it's basically, have I stopped sharing? Wait, stop. Okay. Oh, wait. Sorry. Okay, now it's stopped sharing, I think. So what you see is that as human beings, we are wired to look at the world in a way that our experience in the real world is, and we tend to replicate that in the virtual world as well, especially with objects around us. Yeah. Can I have the next slide, please? This also means that when we are present with our body, and when we have a relationship to our surroundings and environments, it also means that we are present with our mind and with our emotions in the virtual world. So for instance, if there is another virtual human being in that space that you're interacting with, and that virtual human being puts out their hand to shake your hand, you might put out your hand to reciprocate this behavior. And that means that it's not only, and the way you react to a human being might be very different from the way that you react to a domestic animal like a dog or a cat in the same virtual space, which means that take your emotional values in the way that you are schooled and you are cultured into that virtual space as well. Next slide, please. Another thing about virtual reality that is very, very powerful is that it's a portal to another space, physical space, another space. So, you know, if any of you have any background in architecture, you know how, or even not architecture, just human experience, you know how spaces make you feel. How we all feel in an elevator is very different from how we might feel in an open balcony that's, you know, on the 11th floor looking down. So when you're designing your virtual spaces, or when you are planning your cinematography or your scenography for your virtual spaces, you have to really keep in mind that with virtual reality, you're actually helping your audiences travel to a different space. And the way the space can make them feel is very powerful. You have a very powerful tool in your hands. You're almost the architect of your virtual reality experience. You're not only the director, not only the storyteller, but in how you create that space, where you put your camera, or how you build what you choose to scan in a photogrammetry way, in a photogrammetric way, is going to be quite, quite influential in how people will feel in that space. Next slide, please. This all brings us to the fact that users are not merely users. We even kind of don't call them, now here in our studio, we don't call them users anymore because it's not the right term for the kind of experiences that we are designing and creating. We call them participants who have a role. And this role may vary and can be on a spectrum from passive to active. So you can go from a 360 film where you're purely observing what's happening in front of you. You may be a witness to what's happening, but you're not expected to interact. On the other hand, you may also be designing a very active kind of documentary where, you know, your participant is expected to perform a role and perform certain actions. So that's something to keep in mind. It's also very, very crucial to consider whose point of view or perspective is the participant going to experience your virtual reality piece from. So every story is written through a perspective, right? There is a point of view in any story, any script, any text that you're writing. In virtual reality, this becomes even more important, relevant, and crucial, because as soon as someone puts on the headset, they are somewhere. It's them. So they have to assume a certain role and they have to play that role. And everything that you can do to make it easier for them to accept their role is going to be leading to a more successful and a smooth experience. Once again, you have to consider what agency will the user have in your piece. So, you know, something we spoke about in terms of interaction. Are they passively observing something, or are they actively engaging? In Kusunda, for instance, we are asking our audience members to use their voice and speak in the experience in order to move forward. What is going to be, what is going to be the agency that your participant is going to have in your piece that you're creating? And all of these, the fact that your participant is key, you have to design the experience, write your experience, keeping your participant in mind. This is key in attaining and influencing empathy or solidarity when we speak about documentaries. Yeah. Next slide, please. Before we move further, I would love to know if there are any questions so far. If you know, feel free to drop the questions in the chat as and when you feel like, and I'll keep an eye out and see if I can answer them immediately, or you know, if we want to collect them and get to them later, that's also fine. Don't feel shy to interrupt me, because you know, I don't also want it to be a one-way street and it's nice to have some kind of interaction. Great. So I think one thing when you're starting out is going to be, you have to brace yourself for some technical know-how. Something I already mentioned earlier is that don't be intimidated by technology, because the more you are confronted by it, the more you also start accepting it. And the tolerance that each of us has to technology is different. But I guess, you know, we would all, you know, I think we will all know where to, you know, what our limits are, and we really need to find out what our limits are and how much we can push ourselves. So like sometimes I always get asked when I'm, you know, when I'm speaking to a group of people who are just embarking on their journeys into creating virtual worlds, what's the difference between virtual, augmented reality, mixed reality, and what is XR? What are all these terms? So very simply put, virtual reality is basically when, you know, when you're wearing a headset that replaces your real world with a virtual world. That's virtual reality. It's as simple as that. Yeah. Augmented reality is when you have your physical world around you. You can still see what's ahead of you. I can see my laptop, I can see my phone around me, but there is a layer of digital objects that is augmenting my real world. So Pokemon Go is a very, very famous example of augmented reality. But augmented reality also comes in many different shapes and forms. It may be audio only. So some years ago, Bose brought out a pair of sunglasses which had speakers in them and which was location aware. And if you were walking down the streets of Kiev, let's say, and if you looked at a certain location, it would tell you what it is. And that's augmenting the reality as well, even if the cue is not visual. Yeah, so it can be audio only as well. Mixed reality is similar to augmented reality, but it's just the term that Microsoft Windows uses. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I guess it's just augmented reality. And, you know, there will be another term that Apple will come up with, and there will be another term that Facebook might come up with. It's all going to happen. So, but something you can settle with for now is augmented reality. Extended reality is just an umbrella term that the industry has kind of agreed on using for virtual and augmented reality and mixed reality, all of this together. So if I say XR, it may mean VR or it may mean AR. So if I introduce myself as an XR creator, it means that I'm creating works that may be virtual reality, that may be augmented reality, or, you know, using mixed reality. So yeah, that's that. Next slide, please. While working with virtual reality, I think one thing that is very, very important to understand right from the start is the difference between 6 degrees of freedom and 3 degrees of freedom. Once again, I want to show you a video, and I am going to share my screen again. And you will see over here that what is 6 degrees of freedom and what is 3 degrees of freedom. Okay, so the upper half of the screen is showing 6 degrees of freedom, which means you have a lot of freedom and agency to move around. Imagine the little figure in the middle wearing the headset to be you. You can move to different objects in the space, and that is 6 degrees of freedom, which means your space in the virtual world is kind of replicating your life in real world. So when I get up from here and I walk to the door, I'm actually moving. And that's what's a 6 degrees of freedom space, which allows you to move in that space. On the other hand, 3 degrees of freedom only allows you to look and to move or to have a perception of 3 axes. So basically, you can look on the x-axis around, you can look up and down, but you cannot get up and move in the space and your virtual world will not react to it. This is a very, very important concept in virtual reality, and it defines the limits of what you are able to do and how, what is the purpose of your virtual reality piece. Is this clear? If yes, then we can move to the next slide, please. Once again, there are different forms of content. There's non-interactive content, which is mainly having 3 degrees of freedom. So it's going to be cinematic 360 video. 360 videos are largely considered non-interactive because you're not interacting with the piece. You're looking at it in many different ways, and what you may experience might be different from what your colleague or your friend may experience in the same piece because you're looking in different directions, but you're not interacting or influencing how the piece moves forward. So that's why it's considered non-interactive. It's very similar in the pipeline that you create. It's similar to a film. So you have, you will have to do the same if you're familiar with working on on film documentaries. This might be the first step to go when you're stepping into the world of virtual reality, is to try and experiment with a 360 film to understand the medium, and it's the lowest barrier and the lowest threshold for you. There can be 2D or 3D animations that are embedded within a 360 film. And you can have a hybrid of live action. So you can film something with your camera and you can sketch on top of that, and you can still view it as a 360 film. And a 360 film may also give you 2 options. It may be mono or stereo. So we've all worn these 3D glasses while watching some 3D films. That's exactly, you can watch the same film without the glasses and it's mono, but when you watch it with the 3D glasses, it becomes stereo, which means you add a layer of depth and a perception of depth into the film. So by a general rule of thumb, stereo 360 films are more immersive than mono 360 films because they have a certain level of depth. Also, 360 films are the easiest to distribute. You can reach a much wider audience with 360 films because they can be viewed. Also, you can upload a 360 film onto Vimeo or on YouTube or many other browsers and share it via a basic link. Yeah, the next slide, please. Then there's different forms of, another form of content are interactive content. Now you can choose to include hotspots within your 360 videos, which means you can make your 360 videos interactive. So you may embed a hotspot inside your 360 film and say that when the viewer is looking here, take them into, that is a portal to go into another world, another room. So you can do that throughout your film and make your 360 video interactive. Just the same way, if you've looked at web documentaries, you can look at you can go through, you can click and play. You can choose where you want to go. You can do that with your 360 films as well. In interactive content, you can also think of designing your experiences in the form of a full-blown game. Imagine Grand Theft Auto or Half-Life in virtual reality. Half-Life does exist in virtual reality. So you are giving your users, participants, the utmost freedom. You're creating it as an open world and letting them roam around, which means you can't control what they do and where they go. And these experiences are way more, you have to, they need way more time to design. Another form of interactive content or an asset that you need to be familiar with, which is very, very handy for filmmakers, is volumetric video. Volumetric video is basically a 3D video. So volumetric films are 3D films, films in which you can walk. So if you wear the headset, the film is filmed in such a way from many different angles using an array of cameras within a studio or outside. So in such a way that it becomes a space that's an entire stage that has been captured that you can walk around in. Photogrammetry is basically a tool or a technique in which you can recreate spaces photorealistically in 3D. So basically, there are certain apps, even on your phone, that you may be able to download and use it if you have a relatively newer phone, that will allow you to create a photogrammetry scan, a 3D scan of any object or space. You can even do a 3D scan of your own face by now, with the new range of iPhones and the ones that are augmented, that have depth sensors in them. Now you may have these interactive, you may create these interactive environments photorealistically, or you may use CG animation. That's up to you. So interactive content can also include animated works. Next slide, please. So one exercise we always start with when we are working on a project or begin brainstorming a project is to start with thinking immersively. We do workshops where we start with, okay, what is the subject of our project and how can we imagine ourselves to be immersed in a moment from that theme? For instance, let's say you are creating a documentary about a marine biologist, and how, you have to, this is your theme, you have a subject which you, what you should start out doing is, okay, let me think about one moment. In the same way that you break a film into different scenes, you also break your, immersive work into different moments or different scenes. For ease of, ease of language, we can use the same word, scene. And then think about, okay, how is it that we are going to, what moment is it that we want to recreate immersively? And with a marine biologist, that might be, and if, that may be, diving into the ocean. That might be something that is a very deeply immersive experience, because you are actually going down underwater, an experience that not many people get to have. So you may pick that. Similar, I don't know, if you are someone who goes, likes to capture, if you're working on a film about volcanoes, you may think about, okay, the volcano erupting is probably a really immersive moment that needs to be captured in some ways. So start out by thinking about one moment about your subject or your theme that draws itself to immersion the most. And then write down what are the sensory inputs that this moment might provide you. What may it look like? What may you hear? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? And what does it feel like? So if you are creating a documentary about a marine biologist and you have actually had the moment to go with them underwater, you may remember that it actually, you feel different in water than on land. You may have a different way of breathing when you're underwater. So how does that feel? So you just go down and write all the haptic sensory inputs that you have as a part of that experience. And then you think about, okay, if that is the experience that I had in real life, having lived through that experience and living through that moment, that is the basis of then being able to recreate that experience for your audiences. It always starts with your experience, and then you're going to translate it in a virtual reality film or an experience for everyone else. So, but the work has to start with you so that you even know what is it that you're trying to create. Yeah, next slide, please. The next part of our workshop or our work goes into translating this moment into an immersive work for our audience. Now, why should you choose? I think, I also sometimes hate when people ask, hey, don't ask me the question, like when people ask me, okay, why should this story be told in virtual reality? I think that's not a valid question always, but as a creator, as a storyteller, you need to know why you are telling the story in virtual reality. What does the technology or the medium allow you to do that other media won't allow you to do? So if it is about diving underwater or witnessing a volcano erupting, the unique affordance of virtual reality is the presence that it offers, something we discussed, right? So you need to know, okay, how do we use the power of making people feel like they are underwater? What kind of a camera are you going to use? What kind of environment are you going to build? How close can you take them? What about movement? Like all these different things is something that you need to have answers to. If you're working on a project that has to do with people, that's a lot of documentaries, you have co-creators with you, you work with communities, you work with your protagonists. Another thing that virtual reality is really good at doing is building a human connection. So give those moments to your audiences with your subjects, with your characters, with your protagonists or your co-creators and the communities. Let them spend time with them the way that they can't do in film. So if there is, if you are working with a family, let's say for your virtual realities, put the camera down or design a space, design a scene, a moment in which you can accompany them doing something that the family does together, makes the participant feel part of that. Maybe having a meal together, maybe playing a game of chess together, whatever they do, so that you build that human connection with them. Another thing that works really well is when people speak directly to the camera in virtual reality and address you directly. Because the camera is the person. So giving the camera a role to play is something, and addressing the camera and the audience member is constantly breaking the fourth wall. With virtual reality, there's anyway no fourth wall. The fourth wall is broken because you're in the space. You're in the film. You're playing a role. When I say you, the audience member is playing a role. They are a participant. So you just have to switch the way you think in terms of there is no frame. There is only the space. There's only that moment. So design accordingly. And also just, help your participant really understand what are they expected to do? What is their role? What is their role? As I said earlier, like the better you're able to explain that, the easier it will be to draw them into your experience. Next slide, please. So writing for immersive can be challenging if you're coming from a film or a documentary background. And we had to adapt a lot in how we were scripting. because, I mean, this is classic for 360 films, but this is also a tool that you can use. I'm going to share a bunch of tools now that we have developed in-house. This is not something we've developed in-house, but I will be sharing some with you shortly as well. Circular scripting is really at the basis of a 360 film. So you're not thinking about a film in scenes. You're thinking about a film as circular spaces, because it's a 360 film and your audience member or your participant has the free will to look anywhere. As a director, you cannot force your audience member or your participant to look in a certain direction. You can tease them and you can give them incentives to look in a certain direction, but you can't force them, right? So that means you have to design, and the colorful circular diagram at the right-hand corner of the screen is a really good way of explaining how to script. So imagine your editing timeline. The editing timeline is pretty linear, right? So one scene after another. In 360, you need to think about one circle after another, one space after another. So you would see at the center is one scene, the red circle is another scene, the green circle is also another scene, the blue following, the violet and the yellow. So these are all scene after scene after scene. Let's say the blue right at the start starts at 0. Yeah. And then the white and the black dots in this diagram are meant to explain. So let's say the white dots are where you want your audiences to look, where the action is going to be happening, how you've designed it. But the audience member may have a very different path that they follow. So they may choose in the first scene to look somewhere else. So the black dots are the ones where the participants are looking. So they might look first in a diametrically opposite space than you want them to look. Following that, they might again not be looking where you want them to look. In the next scene, they're also looking somewhere else than where you want them to look. And in the next scene, they're close to where you want them to look. And finally, again, they've looked away somewhere where you didn't intend that they would look. But as a creator, you still need to create the piece in such a way that even if they follow the trajectory of the black dots, they understand your film and the story that you're trying to tell, right? So that is the challenge of writing for immersive. You need to create scenes that are going to be more inclusive. Another thing to think about in the central diagram that I want to come to is the figure in the middle of the piece is the participant or the user. And their field of view, I mean, we don't have eyes at the back of our head. And even when you wear a virtual reality headset, your point of, field of view is limited. So you're not able to look everywhere at the same time. So it is very normal that people will miss certain parts of the scene that you are creating. And it's important to keep that in mind and know the limitation and then design accordingly. Next slide, please. This is one tool, again, that can be handy if you're coming from a film background. While working in virtual reality, you can also, once again, design your script in such a way, so divide your space instead of it looking at it as a frame. You have to look at it on the whole. So you divide your scene into 4 quadrants first. So you have Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 when you divide, right in front. So action that's happening in front of you, to your right, to your left, and to the back. That's your scene, yeah? Then you also have in virtual reality what's happening above and what's happening below. So you have Q5 and Q6, yeah? And then when you're writing your script, you can color code the action that's happening in different parts of the quadrant. So for instance, over here, the second line of the script reads that the title grows brighter, then floats away. A single narrow beam of light slashes across the darkness in front of us, reminding us we are not blind. So everything that's in black will happen in Q1. Everything that's green is moving to Q4. Everything that's blue is happening in Q3, and everything that's red is happening in Q2. Once again, so you will notice if you read the first paragraph that the director is actually, or the scriptwriter in this case, is actually wanting to move the participant's attention from one quadrant all the way 360 degrees and back. So that's one way that you can write scripts for immersive. Next slide, please. If you have an interactive piece, then you need to not only account for the audio-visual cues and what's happening where, but you also need to count for interaction. So in this piece, this is a script that we have worked on earlier, and this is just an example, a screenshot. We say that at approximately 3 minutes, a visual cue ends, a 360 video ends, and then you hear some audio, and the interactive element requires you to, what happens whenever you're writing for interaction, you have to phrase it in the way that you write code or script. When you're programming, you would say if, then this. So there is the direct causation of an action. So what is the act, and what is the act, and what is the result? So you say if the user or the participant steps out of a place, then this is going to happen. And then what happens if that doesn't happen? So you start, having forks in your script as well. Next slide, please. And finally, I think, not finally, but you have to be also willing to include many different elements into your script. So normally, this is an example of an early version of the script that we had for Kusunda. And very soon we started realizing that we have so many different elements in each scene. So on the visual side of things, we had we had 2D videos playing, we had photogrammetry, we had volumetric video, we had 3D animation. And on the audio side of things, we had a voiceover, we had interview material, we had music, sound effects, and then I can't even read the last bit, but anyway, I think it's interaction sounds or SFX, and then the visual elements, which include UI. So, if I'm not the person who's working in a game engine. So when you're creating an interactive experience, what you do is you have all the material and you have to put it together inside a game engine such as Unity or Unreal Engine. And I'm not a programmer or a developer. So I need to, as an author, as a director, producer, I need to have the best tools at hand to communicate with the developing team. So that there's no confusion. And we figured out in the process of creating Kusunda that, oh my God, there are just so many different elements that if we don't break it down onto an Excel sheet and have a time code of what's happening where, it might easily be lost. We can sit for hours and guess, and then there is no one place to go to find out, okay, is that how it was intended, or was it the other way around? So yeah, we started putting things down, and this became kind of a Bible where we could always go to, okay, what is the scene number? Where is something going wrong? Okay, scene 6.4. Okay, let's look exactly at what's happening in scene 6.4 and find out what are the different elements that are there. Is everything playing as, as expected? And how do we pinpoint where the problem is? So this is something, if you're working on a complex interactive piece with many different kinds of assets, I would recommend you to do. Next slide, please. Storyboarding is another thing that's very important for immersive. If you're working, whether it's working on a 360 film or on a spatial film, interactive, fixed off experience, it's really good if you start drawing very early. And the same way how films have storyboards that are rectangular or square and that are flat, you need to start designing circular storyboards. So, once again, have the little user at the center of your space, mark out what is their field of view, and then go down to, okay, where do you ideally want them to look and what's going to be happening? How are you going to design your space and design your scene accordingly? Next slide, please. Sometimes it might be helpful to actually draw out maps of particular spaces. So the experience Home After War was very, very reliant on where the user was going to be or where the participants was going to be situated in the space of the VR experience. So we started having floor plans of the house in which the story takes place, and then had embedded different elements into it. So the little orange smiley was where the participant was going to start their journey. And then we said, okay, there's an interactive element of the door, which is indicated by green, and we knew where that was located. Then we also, because it was such a spatially demanding experience, we said, okay, let's also place the stereo billboards and where the action happens at certain other points. So the floor plan of the experience ended up playing a really important role in navigating the user's journey. Thank you. Next slide, please. And the next, sometimes it can be when we were working with Kusunda, and when we are even now currently working with Kusunda, we realized that animation is really hard to prototype in some ways. Like drawing in 2D cannot answer all the questions of 3D. So we started experimenting and playing around with Lego. So we would, we can play the video, and it just became the easiest way to kind of have an animation layout that would help us to understand what is exactly what did the art director imagine, what did we imagine, and where all the different elements are going to be placed in a scene. Can we play the video, please? So.
Oh, nice. The reflection.
Yeah.
So, that's a camera position.
Mm-hmm.
We can keep it for reference. So,
like this, you mean?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's not 100% accurate. So, Little Bahadur speaks. Are you recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Little Bahadur speaks. The fire blends out. The room blends out. Jungle blends in. Slowly, a tiger is approaching behind a tree. Stops next and a little bit behind Lil Bahadur. Looks into perhaps a camera. Lil Bahadur is faded out. We have time to react. Either the tiger jumps, or the tiger turns away and walks off behind some other trees and bushes. The room blends in, the jungle blends away, fire and Lil Bahadur reappear for a smooth transition to 8.4.
Yeah, so I guess that's something to just as a tip, is that if you're having difficulties communicating concepts within the team, even if it's a small team, using clay figures, Lego, and such items that are fun to play with might be really helpful and might save a lot of time, effort, and resources than creating something in VR or even on a 2D layout. It just saves a lot of time. Another thing that I want to mention here, as you could have told already, is that a lot of our work is multidisciplinary. So it's broken down into many different stages. This is just an example of a team and the process that we went through for Home After War, where we had the research and the pre-production and the photogrammetry training right at the start, many different stages which involved a lot of different people in production, in post-production, testing, and onto building and installation, as well as distribution, something we completely underestimate. And if you're working on impact documentaries, then impact assessment is also something that you need to keep in mind. So it is also, as just going into what was previously, going back to what I previously said, communication between all these different teams is really important. Sometimes your researcher might not understand the language that your coder is speaking, and it might be your job then to be able to build this bridge using language and using tools such as a Lego table or a sketch or a circular script in order to communicate thoroughly between different departments. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the Q&A is broken into 2 lines, but I hope there's enough time still for Q&A, because I would love to also give the floor to all of you, share your experiences, and yeah, hope this was not too overwhelming.
Everything all right. We have some questions. First, it's what are possible alternatives of wearing a helmet, a dome cinema, or what other way?
Sorry, did you say what are the differences?
No, what is the alternative? What's next?
Yeah, I mean, I have been seeing of wearing a helmet, a dome cinema. Yes, a dome cinema is something that is a viable alternative for a virtual reality helmet, and it also does things differently in the sense that we spoke about all the unique affordances of virtual reality, and one unique thing that a dome cinema offers is a collective experience. So it's way more, way similar to cinema and sitting in a cinema hall compared to being isolated in your headset. So if I would, I would think about what is it that you can tell differently for the dome compared to a virtual reality. I think not all VR experiences will translate very well for a dome experience. And that's something we have actually been speaking about. For instance, Kusunda, as a virtual reality experience, it won't translate well into a dome experience because it has people in it who are speaking directly to you, and that's not the most ideal for a dome. So it would really depend on what the narrative is and the way you're going to tell the story. Piotr, you have a story. Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Γκаятрі. Thank you for a great lecture with many details about script and everything. I want to ask about how do you see the future of the VR? It seems like Facebook is making Oculus 4 and plan to have it everywhere. And also, for example, why not well known, or maybe I missed something, but yes, the VR work of Iñárritu, Flesh and Meat and Sand. Yeah, so it was a big installation awarded, but since that time there was no such a big project like this. why it is and how you consider it was some kind of avatar film, and yeah, people get tired of it, and we need to wait for some changes in technology. So what?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me to be a prophet, and I'm not one. So, but it's a really interesting space to be in right now, because at the moment, on the one hand, you see, even since the time we started creating virtual reality works, a lot of things have changed, and it has been like 5 to 6 years that Now Here Media and I have been working with virtual reality, and a lot has changed in that time. So there is a movement that's going forward. There is forward momentum, but a lot of people still find it to be really slow. And that has resulted in, it's not gone as fast as we thought it would go. So a lot of startups have closed because the investor money ran out. People don't have investors, a lot of venture capitalists and investors don't have the money or the will to wait long to get their investments back. So that is a trend that we have seen. And at the same time, it's a technology, virtual reality at least, is something that has not hit the mass market yet. And as you rightly said, Facebook is really at the forefront of making that happen. And their whole, Facebook is a social platform, social media platform. And I think for them, they are really looking at making this also making virtual reality a social medium as well, with their Horizon, which is going to be released pretty soon for the Oculus Quest and all the other headsets. And at the same time, Apple has been more focused on augmented reality. And although they are very, very tight-lipped about what they're going to bring out, there are some market reports that say that in 2023, there's going to be a promising, it has been delayed a few times, but they say 2023, they will launch an AR headset, and the same with Facebook. So I think, and also then, now with a lot of remote work that has been forced by the pandemic, spatial computing is really gaining a lot of traction. So there is, I think the pandemic has also kind of accelerated the pace at which some of the technology developments are moving. So it's going faster than in the last, decade or so. And I think it won't be, I think in the next 10 years, we would all be working more in kind of spatial computing spaces. It will become way more okay to have augmented and virtual reality as part of our work life, so that we wear a headset to make a phone call, a video call, which would be more also with a virtual, presence. So that's how I see it going forward.
Thank you.
I have one question more, if maybe somebody take your hand. About can we say that when you do film with a simple camera, or I don't know how to say it, we do it in 2D, so we have one way to see. And when we do VR, we have like all scene. What you think about for what you do for Oculus experiment or for video on YouTube? What you think is the end stage of film? Where is the end of film? Okay.
I'm trying to understand your question correctly. So you're asking, what is the difference? How would you, what's the difference between putting it up on the Oculus store versus on a YouTube channel?
And what you prefer?
Yeah, what you prefer. I think, there have been some films that we have worked on where we distributed via the headset at public installations and met our audiences at public installations, but also just so that we could reach a larger audience, we uploaded it on Facebook 360, on Facebook as well as on YouTube. So you can hold your release for the YouTube and the Facebook release until you have gathered all the press that you want and the way that you ideally, as a creator, as a storyteller, you want to show the piece in a certain way inside a headset. So I would give that the priority, and then later on put it up on YouTube VR when you have, because I think it really is very different from piece to piece. There are pieces that also go directly onto the Oculus Store. Oculus TV is like the video platform for Oculus, which is also, there's a pretty strict wall over there, where they curate the videos that go onto Oculus TV. So not everyone gets to be on Oculus TV. So it's quite restrictive. But if you are planning to go online with your piece on a store or on a platform like YouTube or Vimeo, what I would recommend is, what is your strategy with your piece? Do you want to hit some film festivals? Do you want to get some press? If you do, then first go for, it's similar to film. Like if you release it online, then you won't get to premiere at a film festival. Or so first have the strategy planned out for the distribution. And do you want to have any impact with the film? Like, do you want to have let the film be used as a tool for advocacy, then plan events around the impact of the film. And then finally, when you've met those goals, try and put it online. But on the other hand, if your main goal and strategy is to get as many eyeballs as possible, then go straight with the store, with the online distribution. And there are also some third parties who are buying and kind of acquiring films. So Weir TV, Weir VR is one of them. VEER. There's Iconic Engine. So there are a lot of people who are also licensing your content and providing it to third parties like telecom providers, etc.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to finish. Thank you. We are so happy to have you again and again. Thank you for your
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you soon.
Yeah, bye.